Catcher in the Rye. I'm keeping it on the shelf, and I'll tell you why. So I'm going to read a little bit of my review because I finished this book some weeks ago and decided that because of its cultural significance and that it is noted as a classic, I should probably do like a legit review other than a written one. I shouldn't say, now I'm devaluing written reviews as not legit. That's silly because I do them more than I do video/podcast reviews. But yeah, The Catcher in the Rye, J.D. Salinger. I'm going to read my written review first, and then I'll expand on that. This classic is a coming-of-age tale about a young man who, through trauma, develops a complex about the need to preserve innocence. It's a little deeper than the slice-of-life genre that I can be on the fence about, because I definitely can be on the fence about that, and we're going to get into that. I found a lot of this book to be humorous, even though I'm not sure it was intended to be. But the diction of the diction of the time, coupled with the lingo and demeanor of the main character, is enough to give me the chuckles often. At first, I found Holden's hypocrisy and unawareness of self to be annoying, but it can fit a teenager in this stage of life accurately, and I eventually got over it and just shook my head every time and moved on. It's an easy read, and I can understand why it's still taught today. It's loaded with symbols and scenario to dissect, as well as a genuine window into a youth struggling with depression and anxiety, albeit one set in the 1950s. I wouldn't put it on my list of important books, but on the list of good ones. So, to get into the why of all that. First of all, Catcher in the Rye is one of those titles that's been thrown around for so long. It's just always been in my mind as this classic book, and also a play. And I never really knew what it was about, like at all. So, at some point, I think I realized it was kind of supposed to be this coming of age story, but even that was like really minimal, like my knowledge of that. So I kind of went into it blind, and I picked it because a friend had just finished reading it, and I was like, okay, well, I'll read it. It's on my shelf, and we'll get into that as soon as possible so we can talk about it. I did find Holden, our main character, pretty annoying a lot of the time. And I think it's one of those things where I'm expecting, which is, again, unfair, but this is the thing, and what I'm learning, I'm expecting my main character to be likable. And I don't like the majority of people. However, there's just a certain amount of flaw in a character that is acceptable to me, and almost all of them, or almost any amount, can be somewhat acceptable or enjoyable to read if they are aware of their flaws. For a long time in this book, Holden is blissfully unaware of how he's kind of a dink, and he's kind of a wiener, and he's incredibly hypocritical. And again, it kind of seems like, yeah, that could fit a kid that age in those circumstances, but it was mostly just, I don't know how to explain it. It wasn't like there were these grand adventures that I could find entertaining. I did find him entertaining at times, mostly because of the way that he spoke and how enthusiastic he was at times, and again, just the lingo of the time. But it wasn't like he was getting into these big, huge misadventures that were entertaining and put a smile on my face. It was more of just how he dealt with people, but it wasn't dealing with them in a good way. I kind of just relished in his youthful idiocy for a while, from time to time, because I'm like, man, yeah, I wish I could say that to people, but that wouldn't be good or healthy or be very mature. So I definitely did enjoy it from time to time because I realized that there's a certain amount of freedom in being that ignorant, for sure. The book did end up surprising me, though. I was surprised that we did get these other themes of anxiety, depression, mental health stuff, and it made the book a lot more complex than I thought it was going to be, because for the majority of the book, I thought it was just going to be I don't know, like The Basketball Diaries was a horrible book. I did not enjoy it. It was basically an account of this youth in New York City who was just being trash and not learning anything and just recounting his tales of getting high and almost dying and getting kicked out of schools and just these things that, okay, that was like one of the, I talk about slice of life books and how I could be on the fence about them. I want to be challenged, and I mean Basketball Diaries was challenging in a way, but not in a way that not in a way that was worth much to me. I can't think of what I learned other than I don't like books like that. That's what I learned. And this was headed in that direction. However, it did end up, like I said, having these other elements incorporated that gave it a lot of depth that I ended up feeling good about. I felt like our protagonist was not, our anti-hero, I don't know what to call him, he was not completely lost. I felt that this was actually a really forward-thinking way to introduce some topics to youth of anxiety and depression without necessarily calling them that. So I think that that's one reason that I think it still gets taught, is that in retrospect, right, like we can apply, and it's always difficult to apply like your contemporary culture to a past culture or time period, but I think that it's suitable here and it fits and it makes sense that our author is telling us some things without, or telling us things that we can define now in a different way and define better, and that we have more open discussion about them, and at the time they didn't. And I don't think this book was necessarily meant to be a catalyst for discussion about these difficult topics, but it did incorporate them in this way, and in this way that kind of, it wasn't necessarily blindsided, but it was a surprise to me, because for the majority of the book I thought this was just going to be a slice of life for this dumb kid who is just kind of frustrating and annoying to read about, and then we realize, oh no, he is more of a complex, nuanced character that has layers, and he's not wooden, you know, he's not just one-dimensional, that the way that I was judging him for a long time. I'm going to get into some spoilers now, real quick. And, or am I? You know what? I'm not. I don't need to get into spoilers. I don't need to unpack the book. It wasn't... It became a little tedious. I was going to say it wasn't this huge joy to read. I feel like I was glad that I read it, and it wasn't completely lost on me, and I am glad I gave it that opportunity. It's not something that I would read again, but there are very, very, very few books I would ever read again, because I have hundreds of books on my shelf right now, and we'll have hundreds more, I'm sure, in 10 years from now, or something. I don't know. I just have too many books to read, too many things to read, and so there's very few things I would want to read again. Very incredibly few. But this is not one of them. If you like classics, if you maybe like that era of the 1950s, I don't know. I mean, it is a coming-of-age tale. That does kind of surprise me in the end, but it definitely has that slice-of-life feel to it for a while, where you're just kind of reading about this kid who's kind of a wiener, and at a lot of points I'm just kind of shaking my head and was like, man, this kid, like, but it has entertaining moments for sure, and I don't know who the target audience for this book would really be, honestly. These are just some quick thoughts because I wanted to document my feelings about it. Catcher in the Rye.